And scientists are currently reviewing the 2-metre social distancing rule in Scotland. Hello and welcome to The 7. 3 children have died and a woman is critically ill after a fire at their flat in Paisley. Firefighters were called to the blaze at a property on Renfrew Road at around 9 o'clock last night. The children were taken to hospital but died a short time later. Our reporter Chris McLaughlin has more.
You didn't have to look far for evidence of tragedy at 166 Renfrew Road, Paisley today. Fire, police and ambulance services all rushed here at around 9 o'clock last night. By that time, the flat upstairs was ablaze. It claimed the lives of 12-year-old Fiona Gibson and her brothers, 5-year-old Philip and 8-year-old Alexander James. Their 39-year-old mother is in a critical condition in hospital.
I seen the first fire brigade come, and that's when I looked out of my hall window. It's a little window at the top of my hall, which looks directly in, pretty much into their front windows, and that's when I saw the flames bursting through the family's front window.
It's left a community shocked and struggling to take in the gravity of what occurred here, paying their respects in whatever way they can.
It was just, I heard all the commotion last night and then my mother told me this morning.
I looked out the window, I could see the smoke billowing up.
I mean, I had a real life to look forward to, you know what I mean?
There's no indication yet as to the cause, but forensic teams arrived in the afternoon and an appeal has been launched for anyone who saw anything to come forward. Almost 24 hours have passed, but you can still smell the smoke around here. Such was the intensity of the blaze. Now, police inquiries will continue for some time, as will the shock felt by the neighbours here. Most didn't want to appear on camera, but told me of their absolute devastation at what's happened. Young lives lost in the most tragic of circumstances. Chris McLaughlin, BBC News, Paisley.
Hundreds of people have gathered for anti-racism rallies across the country. Demonstrations in Glasgow and Edinburgh were mostly peaceful. However, one man was arrested in Glasgow for obstructing police and another in Edinburgh for threatening and abusive behaviour. Graham Stewart reports.
Despite police appeals to stay away, hundreds gathered in Glasgow's George Square. Taking the now familiar knee in opposition to racism and police brutality, marking World Refugee Day and calling for justice closer to home.
During the beginning of the pandemic, asylum seekers were removed from their houses into hotels. Why did this happen?
But this was also a stand against the scenes of last week, when right-wing loyalists, who the First Minister branded racist thugs, clashed with police.
We saw racists and fascists the other day running after everybody, not running after Muslim or asylum seekers or refugee, but running after everyone, you know, running wild on the streets of the Glasgow and George Square, which is really a shame for the city of Glasgow. Glasgow is a great city, you know, Glasgow is a city which welcomed Nelson Mandela.
So there's been a very large and visible police presence here. It's allowed the anti-racist protesters to hold their protest in peace, while at another end of George Square, a very small group of loyalists have been penned in at the back. Despite a call by the National Defence League for veterans, patriots and loyalists to turn out in force, their presence was barely noticeable. This time, much of the police activity focused on the Celtic supporters group, the Green Brigade. Later, after the main rally had finished, they were hemmed in by police in the centre of the square. Police Scotland say they posed a threat to public safety. As the group were escorted to the Gallowgate area, some protesters felt the police had taken a harder line on them than they had with loyalists last week.
Women got attacked, refugees got attacked, coins, racist abuse, Nazi salutes. Where's the protection for us? Where's the protection for peaceful protesters?
Meanwhile, in Edinburgh, at the statue of Henry Dundas, who delayed the abolition of the slave trade, hundreds gathered, socially distanced, to demand its removal. Graham Stewart, BBC News.
The number of people who've tested positive for coronavirus in Brazil has passed 1 million, only the second country to do so after the United States. Brazil had also registered nearly 49,000 deaths. Yesterday saw a new record daily number of cases, suggesting the outbreak is far from over. Katy Watson reports.
This is the reality behind Brazil's spread of COVID-19. The cases keep climbing, the infection keeps spreading, and Brazil doesn't yet have it under control. Friday saw a massive spike in the number of new cases, a record at nearly 55,000. According to the Health Ministry, the rise was due in part to several states having trouble in reporting data earlier in the week. But numbers are numbers, and they're frightening.
In fact, people only start believing COVID-19 is real when it's a family member or themselves who get it, because as long as there's no one in the family, no one they know who gets it, people won't get real about what's happening.
Each and every day, more people are taken by COVID-19 here in Brazil. This week saw 4 consecutive days of more than 1,200 fatalities. All the while, cities like São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro are starting to open back up. After more than 3 months in quarantine, people are trying to get back to some kind of normality. But life in Brazil is anything but normal. President Jair Bolsonaro has, from the very beginning, campaigned for Brazil's economy to reopen. He's railed against social distancing, even going against his own health ministry, and firing those who dared to disagree with him.
Brazilian people really had a hard time figuring out how to behave because of the questionable guidelines. The health ministry, along with governors, asked for and stressed the need for isolation, for distance. The president said exactly the opposite. He did the opposite. He systematically broke those recommendations. He made many people question them.
Jair Bolsonaro is referred to by some as the Trump of the tropics. It's true he's long admired Donald Trump and his way of doing politics. The two men have much in common, not least the way they've handled the pandemic. The figures in the US are staggering, but Brazil too is alarming. They're now exclusive members of a club nobody wants to join. Katy Watson, BBC News in São Paulo.
A look now at some of today's other stories. Spain will allow UK tourists to enter the country freely from tomorrow, although holidaymakers would still have to quarantine for a fortnight once they return. Currently, anyone who travels there has to self-isolate for 14 days when they arrive and again when they come home. Talks are underway for Britain to form so-called air bridges with a number of European countries. President Donald Trump will hold a rally in Tulsa in Oklahoma today despite health officials' concerns about the spread of COVID-19. Supporters started queuing outside the venue earlier this week and a lawsuit which tried to stop the event was blocked. President Trump has warned any opposition protesters to stay away. Demonstrators have covered the French health ministry in red paint to symbolise the blood of people who have died of coronavirus. The activists blame the country's government for the scale of fatalities and cited the treatment of health workers as reason for their actions. 2-metre social distancing rule in Scotland. An announcement is expected from the UK government next week, with it looking likely that the regulation will be relaxed as transmission rates of the virus continue to fall. The hospitality industry has warned the government that many businesses won't survive if the guidance isn't reduced to 1 metre. Earlier, I spoke to the National Clinical Director, Professor Jason Leach. I began by asking him about the review of the guideline in Scotland.
The 2-metre rule has taken on a bit of iconic status in the last few days, particularly around education. So the advisory group, the scientific advisory group, will be considering that this week and potentially into the following week. We'll go as fast as we can, and we will give advice to Mr. Swinney, the Cabinet Secretary for Education and Deputy First Minister, and to the First Minister about what we think both the rule should be now and also the trajectory, how this virus is looking, what the modelling looks like it's going to be. The Northern Irish, remember, have said 1 metre in schools, but not until the 24th of August, not tomorrow. So we have to be careful. The virus is still there, but we're as keen as everybody to get education, hospitality, beer gardens, everything open as fast as we can.
As you were talking about schools there, you mentioned Northern Ireland have reduced the guidelines to 1 metre. English schools are set to return fully in September. Does this put pressure on the Scottish Government?
So that's a question for Mr. Swinney, really. I am comfortable with the scientific advice he's been getting and the future scientific advice he will get. He takes that advice very, very seriously. And we won't be bounced because Denmark did something or Wales did something. We will, of course, understand what they've done. We've looked at the Danish situation. We've looked at what's happening in other countries, and we will use the evidence that is generating to help us. We've got to be careful. Some schools in some other countries have now had to close again. There have been some outbreaks in schools. So we're cautious, but I'm cautiously optimistic that we will be able to get as many kids back as we can. I mean, my wife's a high school teacher. She wants full classes. She wants the full school. She wants it back to normal because that's the best way of educating the kids. And that's what we all want, but we want to do it in a safe way. And it may need a little bit of transition, but we'll do that as quick as we can.
Now, relaxing the rule could make a massive difference to the hospitality sector in particular as they gear up to reopening next month. It could be the difference between some places being able to open or really struggling to open for the foreseeable future. What do you say to those people that are so concerned about this?
Yeah, I say that it's a balance of risk. It's really difficult. And my job is not to decide what bits should open. My job, along with my colleagues in the public health and clinical environment, is to give the best advice we can about the virus, but also keeping an eye on the other harms that lockdown causes, both immediate harms to healthcare for those who haven't been able to get their elective surgery done, for example, but also on the society and economic harms from lockdown. I mean, people's businesses depend on this. I don't really like the essential, non-essential split that I have used and others have used. If you own the pub or restaurant next to my house, that's a pretty essential business for you. And you employ people and you're part of the community. That feels important. But we can only do that when it's safe.
Thank you very much for your time, Professor Leach.
Thank you.
In sport, the Scottish FA has written to Hearts and Partick Thistle to ask why they have opted to take legal action against their relegations. The two clubs filed a petition at the Court of Session on Wednesday after the SPFL ended the season early. In it, they have asked for a judge to scrap promotion and relegations throughout all 4 of Scotland's divisions. That sparked a robust response from Dundee United, Raith Rovers and Cove Rangers, who had stayed down despite being named champions. 4 games in the English Premier League today. Bournemouth and Crystal Palace will kick off in just over half an hour. Watford and Leicester finished in a 1-1 draw after Ben Chilwell and Craig Dawson traded terrific stoppage time goals. Brighton beat Arsenal 2-1. West Ham and Wolves are in the closing stages of their game, with Wolves currently leading 1-0. It's been a beautiful day. Is it going to last? Here's Gillian Smart.
Good evening to you. It's been an absolute beauty of a day across most of the country. This is Murray, but across most of Scotland, we've had blue skies and plenty of sunshine, just a few showers around. And we've had some mist and low cloud that's been plaguing the Northern Isles, and that will stick around over Shetland tonight. Elsewhere overnight comes a change in the shape of this rain band that will move in on freshening winds. That rain will be persistent, it will be heavy at times, and it will reach many parts by morning, just staying shy of the northeast. It'll be another very mild night, temperature-wise. Tomorrow morning, that rain band continues its progress northeastwards across the country, and then it becomes confined to the Northern Isles in the afternoon. Elsewhere, skies brighten, some good sunny spells, but there will also be a scattering of heavy, possibly thundery showers. Quite brisk winds again through the day tomorrow, and temperature-wise, still mid to high teens. Not bad. This is Monday, a good deal of cloud. There will be some pulses of showery rain. Winds still brisk and feeling a wee bit cooler. That's the forecast.
Well, that's all from tonight's team. Lucy White will be here tomorrow at 7 o'clock. Have a lovely evening. Bye-bye for now.
A taste experience.
It's a 6-course